Today on Locked On Red Wings, should we be concerned that Raymond and Seider haven't signed yet?
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. Scotty's also the host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. And I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Red Wings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, here on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Scotty, real quick question for you, not Red Wings related. But I got to ask, right? I always ask like one quick Tigers question as we start the show. How excited are you that the Tigers are back to 500 for the first time after the All-Star break? After the All-Star break for the first time since 2016.
It's cool. It's cool. There's been a lot of good to take out of the month of August specifically, and hopefully they only keep getting healthier and. I'm not one of those people that's going to instill like, oh, look, wild card. I'm not one of those people. That's not going to happen.
I'll do it.
If they can finish over 500 with this young of a team, I think that would be pretty encouraging going into the fall. So yeah, great vibe. Winning is good no matter what. So
that sounds pretty familiar though, doesn't it? To conversations we've had over the last couple of years with the Red Wings. Yeah. Although at one point we were having the conversation that the Tigers were ahead of the Red Wings in terms of rebuild. And then here the Red Wings are sneaking very close to getting the playoffs where the Tigers haven't sniffed it. And they will not sniff it unless they get these 2 big RFAs, but 3 RFAs in total, done before the season begins. And that's kind of the topic of discussion on today's episode, Scotty, is should we be concerned that Berggren, Mo, and Ray, specifically Mo and Ray, right, in terms of impact, have not signed their deals yet? We've had almost next to nothing in terms of updates on the contract front for those guys. There was a Dave Pagnotta from the fourth period tweet yesterday, and I think it was on NHL Network earlier on Tuesday as well, where he talked about the fact that Raymond and the Red Wings are still far apart, but the conversations are ongoing, and that Berggren is close and will probably be signed before training camp. But like it's been... the last time we really had a serious conversation about their contracts was after Yzerman said that it wasn't going to be done before free agency. So it's been almost 2 months. September's right around the corner, and they're still not under contract. So the pivotal question I have for you, Scotty, to lead things off with is, are we worried that these 3 guys, namely the 2, have not signed their contracts yet?
No, I wouldn't say worried is a word that I would use. I don't, when I think about this situation, I don't get nervous or anxious about the potential that it won't happen or something like that. I still fully expect it to happen. And yeah, I would not say that I'm too nervous or scared about the situation, but it is certainly one that is, both parties seem to be digging their metaphorical heels into the ground on. I mean, this is something we know that about Yzerman. We know that he is very much one to he will drag a negotiation out for as long as he possibly can. But it's interesting. I also think maybe timing has something to do with it in terms of which one signs first. Like, I think that there's a chance that they're like, oh, Seider's going to get more money, so we want to see what he gets so that Raymond can then be like, oh, like I want to be, this far away from Mo type of thing. I don't know. There's a lot of like nuance in it. I'm not really sure what to make of the fact that it's been so long and we're still waiting on it. But am I nervous about it? No, I would not say that I'm nervous about it.
Yeah, I'm not worried yet either. If we get into like training camp and the preseason and they're not signed, I'll be like, all right, let's get this going. Because if I recall correctly, for a player to play in the season, upcoming season, they have to have their contract signed by like December. But I don't want to get into the season with their contracts not being signed. But that being said, like I'm with you where I'm not all that worried, and that's for a few different reasons, right? One, we're talking about 3 players that are European, right? And I would imagine, I don't know this for fact, but I would imagine those players probably go home over the summer, right? They return back to Sweden, or they return back home to Germany in Moritz Seider's case, and they don't have a ton of contact with their respective front office. And that may be by design. That may be like, okay, let's take a couple weeks off, enjoy your summer, and we'll revisit this when we get closer to training camp, or you return back to the States. And that could be a major reason why we haven't heard much, because there really actually isn't that much, right? We heard all about how, like, you know, Pagnotta mentions that the Raymond contract, they're still talking, right? Well, we heard that with Patrick Kane all the way up until the day before free agency when that contract was signed. So like the two parties, the agent and Yzerman, might be in contact with one another, but not a lot of productive conversations are happening. And while that may not be far off, these things tend to happen quickly. And we are in a deadline-driven sport, right? So the moment free agency opened, July 1st hit, this was always a distinct possibility that these contracts weren't going to be signed until training camp, right? Like, so that's one of the major reasons why, just to start off with, that I'm not too overly concerned that these guys haven't signed yet.
Yeah. And I think that there's, when it comes to the conversation surrounding these two at this point, I think that like fear factor is pretty low on that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think when I think of this situation, you know, me being afraid of them not getting a deal done is very low on that list. I think that there are a lot more things to discuss involved with it, which obviously I'm sure we're about to. But I guess I'll just reiterate so we can move on. Like I'm certainly not worried about them, you know, not getting a deal done at some point.
Well, like another reason why I'm not too concerned either is like this Dave Pagnotta report, right, where they're not too far away, and he even went on NHL Network and he said like the conversations are ongoing. So like while they may not be close, it's not like there's bad blood. But this is also negotiations we're talking about. Like this could have been the agent leaking to Pagnotta or any beat writer like, hey, we're not close, as a tactic to try and get because that's what they do, is they feed not necessarily false information, but they'll leak this information out to try and instigate the other party to make something happen. Like, these are just how these things happen, and I'm just genuinely not concerned with the fact that they haven't happened yet. So I with their deals, like, yes, I want them done, and like, we are close to September, and like, yeah, there's maybe a little part of me that's like, all right, like the back of my mind that's like, what if? Like, what if? But logically speaking, like at the end of the day, the biggest reason why, of course, they'll be signed is they are RFAs. They are RFAs. They are restricted free agents. So they have the luxury of taking their time in signing them, especially when it comes to guys of this magnitude. Of course, it would make sense that when we're talking about the future of the franchise and the core of this team, it would take a long time to hammer out the details of their contracts, whether it be long-term, whether it be a bridge deal, as to what is best for the player and what is best for the future cap allocation of this hockey team.
Right. And I think that kind of perfectly transitions us. We can do it after the break if you want, into like the next conversation involved with this, which is, has the delay or the lack of getting a contract done up to this point, and the fact that it is taking much longer than we anticipated, has that changed your mindset of what either of these players, rather, I guess you can throw Berger in there too if you want to, are going to get contract-wise? I mean, we talked about this early in the offseason. We were like, yeah, we'll probably both push for, 8 years, 7-8 years. And then obviously we know how much cap space they have allocated for this conversation. And so it's going to be something similar to that. But I think that is really the conversation I have with myself when I think about this situation, is like, do I still feel the same way that I did, 4 months ago when we started this dialogue?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we'll get into that in segment 2. So stay tuned for that on segment 2. Let's go to break. Smooth, Brian. I got to talk to you guys today about Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more using those game time picks. And all-in prices is a toggle that you can turn on that'll help you show the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. Get a panoramic view from your seats in the app before you buy using Seat Views, and that lowest price guarantee will credit you 110% of the difference. And your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry using that Game Time ticket coverage. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, I think in the future that's one I can get you in on. I can ask you what time it is, and then you just deepest voice you possibly can. Give it to me the deepest voice you possibly can right now. Hit game time. Just hit that note.
I don't know. Game time. I'm laughing. I can't do it.
He's Batman. So segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, you said something yesterday that to Armando in our crossover that had me wait, I don't know necessarily if I feel that way anymore. And I just want you, for the people, to kind of refresh, have our stances at all on the types of contracts that they will receive shifted at all. What was your stance? Can you refresh the listeners on that?
Yeah, I mean, my stance hasn't really changed. And I think that is something that is going to be unique from person to person. I still think that it is in all parties' best interest to give them both as many years as you can, specifically Seider, but Seider, I'll throw Raymond in there too. I think that it is still very beneficial for both of them to get 8 years. And then again, you have the salary cap set aside for this specifically. So I'm not too worried. Now, I don't want you to go out there and give Raymond $12 million a year, but I'm not too worried about the AAV from a year to year basis. I think that'll probably be in the range that we've been talking about all summer. But I am still very much of the belief that even though this has really dragged on and is much further along than we anticipated it to, I still think that it's in the best interest of everybody, and especially for the Wings, to try to get as many years out of both of these guys as possible.
Yeah, so I agree with you in principle, right? I 100% agree that it is in the team's best interest to get these guys locked up long-term as early as possible. But I'm starting to wonder now if that's the most realistic case, right? Because I do look at the cap space. You're right, they do have cap space allocated for those two guys. But with the Berggren contract still the question mark, not that that's going to be hugely impactful, you have almost 18 million, closer to 17.7. So let's say 17.7 remaining in your current cap space. And I know that number can shift once training camp begins and you waive some guys. I don't think Lagesson 7.75 is good, or 775,000 is going to be on the payroll come game one. I really don't. But at the same time, Albert Johansson's 925, whatever it is going to be up. So that number will shift a little bit here and there. I really just think that maybe because of the Berggren contract, and Pagnotta also reported that he's going to get a 1 year or a short multi-year, so 1 or 2, and it'll be a low number, 1 or 2 million, but that already knocks your number down to 16 million. Maybe the realistic expectation here is only one gets that long-term deal and the other gets a short bridge deal. And we kind of covered this earlier in the summer as well, that if you're going to give them a bridge deal, you can only max out at 3 years. Because if you give them a 4th year, they will no longer be RFAs. They will be UFAs at the end of that 4th year. If you give them 3 years, they expire as an RFA. So I'm almost wondering if, for staggering purposes, staggering their contracts as they go, but also for that cap situation to give you flexibility even as near as this year, right? Give you more flexibility and, of course, a little bit more for the next couple years on that bridge deal. It might be better off to give one of those guys a bridge deal. And the guy I'm thinking to get a bridge deal has actually completely shifted as well. This is one I've done a 180 on, where when we were talking about this all the way back in June, probably late June, as we were preparing for the trade deadline, I would have told you give the long term to Mo. he is the future of this blue line. But now that I'm thinking about it, you want to give the guy who you think has the highest possible ceiling in terms of impact the biggest contract, the longest term contract now, so you don't have to give him more money later. And I think Moritz Seider's usage could not get any more extreme than it already has. Like in terms of his, like he has a huge impact. Like I don't want what I just said to come across as like Seider's impact's not going to be as big as Raymond's. It is, just differently. The other thing is like, but you're already using him at 100% capacity in one area. His point totals are 42, his rookie year 50. I don't think he is going to offensively produce a ton more than 50. He might go in the 50 to 60 range. So if we're already using him at 100% capacity in the defensive zone, and I don't believe that his offensive production is going to get that much higher than at best case scenario 60 points, then I'd be more comfortable giving him the bridge deal right now, because in a few years, if he still stays around this, hopefully his deployment actually gets a little easier, so that production does get to uptick a little bit, I don't expect to have to pay him a crap ton more than what you would have to pay him now on a long-term deal. Where Lucas Raymond is concerned, this year he proved that he could have 90 points in this system, because he's 21, just turned 22 this year, and he led the team in points, 30-plus goals, 70-plus points. That's a guy I want to lock up ASAP. Because if you bridge him and in 3 years he's a 90-point player, you're going to have to pay him substantially more money than you would if you paid him long-term now. So that's why when you said that yesterday, I was like, we must not have discussed that. I've started to feel like maybe a little differently. Because in the past, I was like, long-term Mo, bridge deal Raymond, if you need to. Again, I agree that ideally, both long-term deals, but it may be more realistic that one gets a bridge deal and the other one gets a long-term. And that's why right now I'm leaning, actually might want to give Seider the bridge deal.
Yeah, I think, well, first off, I don't think they're going to yet. I don't think they're going to let Jonathan Berggren, I don't think they're going to let his contract, I don't think they're going to prioritize making sure Berger is locked up over, okay, like we're really close to getting Raymond or Seider on 8 years. So like, oh, but we can't because we like have to play Berger. Like I feel like they're going to prioritize those two over him. So I guess I'll start with that as far as like cap allocation. But when it comes to it, I mean, it's a fascinating point. And I do think that there is a lot of reason to side with what you said. I think that the assumption that the gap between what you would give Seider in a bridge and a long term not being like that much, relatively speaking, is like a pretty big assumption. Like
sorry, let me clarify.
Yeah.
What I was trying to say is the difference between like cap percentage you would allocate in a long-term deal now versus 3 years from now might not change a lot. Bridge deals, it completely shifts what you pay the guy. That's not what I meant. I meant long terms now versus
I think that's that's what I'm saying. Like I think that's a pretty. I'm not saying you're wrong. I just think that is an assumption. Like that is a pretty hefty assumption. Like I mean, there's nothing that says he isn't 3 years from now one of the best like defensive defensemen in hockey and is still putting up 50-point seasons. Like he's going to get a pretty hefty pay bump, especially if the cap keeps going up. I know you're talking about cap percentage and whatnot, but like I think that there is still very much a world in which like you would have to give him a pretty big raise. Now, I think for me, there's also some positional value a little bit, and that's not to devalue what Raymond is or like what Raymond is doing, but I think that there's also like a pretty objective difference from a front office perspective of, can we lock up a number one defenseman for 8 years, or are we going to prioritize higher the winger that, again, like wingers are just devalued in hockey because there's more of them than any other position. Like that's just unfortunately how it is. Now, again, I'm not trying to devalue him because he has been incredibly valuable to this team. He put the team kind of on his back at one point this year. Obviously love Lucas Raymond, but we're really trying to get like super nitpicky and we're splitting hairs here between these two guys about like who should, if you do have to choose one or the other to get 8, I think I would still lean Mo just because of the anchor that I think he would provide. But like your logic is very sound, and like that does make sense that, if you as a front office are expecting Raymond to take another monumental step forward as far as point production goes, then yeah, he should absolutely be a high priority for you. And he should be the higher priority. I think that's sound logic. I just think for me, I still think that Seider's going to get a hefty pay raise when he's UFA eligible, and B, locking up a number one defenseman long term just inherently, because of how hockey works, more value.
Yeah, not like I think your argument about the positional values is very valid. Like number one defensemen, especially of Seider's caliber, are very hard to come by in the NHL. So it does make a lot of sense to give him the long-term deal. And I think Eisman even said it himself, on the draft floor. Like ideally, I give them both long-term deals. I'm just thinking like because of the fact that, and again, Bergeron's not going to get a lot of money, but it was stated in that report that they're close and that expected to be signed, and that's going to take another $1 million away. And then you're left with $16.5 million to lock them up both long term. And we're thinking Seider could make like $8.5 million on his own. So I'm just wondering if maybe it's not realistic to expect them both to get long term deals at this point, unless they take a hometown discount, which I hope they do, because that'd be fantastic for me and all Red Wings fans and the front office. But like with that being a mindset we're expecting, where they both could make north of $8 million. Or just even $8 million, and leave you with like $500,000 in cap space, that might make it more realistic that one of them gets a bridge deal. And that's why I'm arguing, like, if you had to give one a bridge deal, who would you choose? And that like would depend on how much bigger of a leap you expect that player to make. So that's kind of the basis of my argument. Like I said, I would love a long-term deal for both. Lock them up at a lower rate now. That'd be fantastic. But then you got to pay both of them again at the same time 8 years from now. So it's
right.
It's a difficult conversation.
Yeah, there's a lot of splitting hairs and a lot of debate over that. If you had to prioritize one, if you could only give one 8 years, who would you give? Right, that's basically the question.
Right.
And there's I'm not even sure there's really a wrong answer. I think everybody, no matter what you say, it's kind of like, yeah, I can kind of see that logic kind of tracks. But I still think it should be of the highest priority to give both of them 7-8 years. Like I really think that again, I don't want anything I said to come across as anything but that. Like that, I still very much want both of them to be here for the next 8 if possible.
It's August, brother. These are the conversations you have in late August, especially when they won't sign the Dean deals. Scotty, we're going to head to another quick break. We have a fun topic in segment 3. There's a new trend going around the NHL. Don't know if it's a mandate, but there's been enough teams that have done it that I'm starting to think it is. And we'll talk about what the Red Wings could do with this presumed mandate in segment 3 of Locked On Red Wings. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. All right, Scotty. There seems to be a new trend in the NHL, and I'm presuming it is a mandate because teams' center ices are beginning to be revealed. And all the center ice circles are now completely filled from perimeter to dot. Completely. The Ottawa Senators blew up their logo. The Florida Panthers have their shield, and then the surrounding is actually the interior of the Stanley Cup. It looks really cool. The Vegas Golden Knights, so on and so forth. They're all completely filling their center ice circle. So that makes me wonder, are the Red Wings going to do this? And if that answer is yes, what could the Red Wings possibly look like? And that's just a fun conversation. Do you have any ideas percolating in that big emphasis on big, beautiful head of yours?
it's too large. Yeah, doctors have said. So I think that when it comes to first off, I like the trend. I
think it looks sick.
I think it looks really good, and I think that there's quite a few that I actually am a pretty big fan of. I mean, you could just like really blow it up, like zoom in, right, and just make the winged wheel huge. And I think that would be something that is is probably on their radar. For me, and this is originated by something that you had texted me when we were talking about this probably 2 or 3 days ago. If you've ever seen the Los Angeles Lakers center court logo, it's the basketball and then it says Lakers, and then there's the stars on the outside, and in each of the stars it has a year that they've won the title. And I think that doing something to be incorporated with the cups would be really cool, and I think that you could make it again, like really kind of spread it out and make it a large thing. I mean, the wheel rather is already circular shaped. Like, I don't think it would be impossible to make a pretty darn cool logo for the Wings at center ice. But that's kind of like where my brain went to originally. I think that that's kind of a decent and, like historic team, like decent blueprint to fill in the center of the court.
Yeah, I mean, I
hockey, obviously.
I like where your head is at too. Like, and I mentioned it to you too. Like obviously the wheel itself is circular, so it's the perfect size. I thought I mentioned that to you in text yesterday, and I saw somebody actually like create a mock-up of it on social media and post it. And I was like, yeah, that does look kind of cool. But at the same time, I would miss having the full logo on the ice because it looks so nice. So then I was thinking about like maybe they could just, as you put it, like find a way to pay homage to the 11 Stanley Cups and use that to fill the rest of the center ice circle rather than just zoom in on the logo, let's say. Other than that, like, this is a perfect opportunity to somehow incorporate Hockeytown back on center ice. Like, I was a guy who, as the Wings were declining and seats were starting to be emptied and like that era of Red Wings hockey was passing, I was, and this is, I know, going to be an unpopular opinion, I was all right with them removing the Hockeytown logo off center ice. I know it's very sentimental to a lot of people, but it was an outdated look. I'm not a fan of the modern look either. And I think the Red Wings logo is so clean that it deserved to be on the ice on its own. But now I think it's been enough, and now that the team's back on the upswing, it's a great time to reintroduce Hockeytown in some capacity onto the center ice logo.
Yeah.
But because of the shape of the Red Wings logo, it's either the circle or you have to fill that negative space with something else. And beyond paying an homage to the 11 Stanley Cups, maybe paying homage to all the legends that have played here as well, because the Red Wings have had an incredible amount of all-time greats play in this rink. Not in this rink, but in this city as well. So like there's a couple of ideas, but I don't have any that like maybe something to pay homage to the Motor City, right? That's, well, again, why it's a wheel. So maybe you could do something with General Motors because they're here, Ford, right? Something along those lines would be really interesting, and I'm really curious to see if when their center ice circle is revealed, if it's going to do any of those things. And I think I'm really looking forward to it because I think it's going to add a nice little flair to the ice rink.
Yeah, I kind of like the idea of you keep the whole winged wheel logo. You don't just go with like the big wheel. Keep the entire thing, and then you fill in that negative space with, again, like color just in general. And then, along the bottom, you can throw Hockeytown back on the ice. You can kind of do two birds with one stone there. I kind of don't mind that idea because that, again, keeps the full logo out there, brings back Hockeytown, fills a lot of space, and meets the, I don't know if it is a requirement or not, but like at least fills.
It seems like it is.
Yeah, it does.
I wonder too, like, could you do it like where you keep the full logo, but then you have like 11 spokes from the wheel peeking out from behind the logo, just kind of going in every direction, filling it out, and the 11 spokes represent. And maybe you can do something too with like the conference championships or something like that to fill in the rest of the gap. I'm just spitballing here.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Like there's a lot of interesting ideas, and I also think it's cool because there's a lot of really talented like graphic designers in the world, and a lot of them are Red Wings fans, and so seeing people's ideas on social media and stuff, I think is cool.
Absolutely. Scotty, do you have any final thoughts you may have pertaining to any of the conversations we've had today?
I don't think so. We ball.
We do ball. We'll be back with a new episode on Friday. We're going to have a Griffins season preview. Our good friend Andrew Rinaldi is going to rejoin us. So stay tuned for that. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.
Every day.